Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. Whether you are returning tonight or finding this quiet channel for the first time, this is a calm place to slow down, learn something gentle, and let the day slowly fall away. Tonight, we are going to rest our attention on something very familiar, a sweet potato. Maybe you picture it baked until the skin wrinkles softly. Maybe you see its orange flesh opening under a fork. Maybe there is a little steam rising from it, with a warm, earthy smell that feels simple, filling, and old. Sweet potatoes are easy to think of as ordinary. They sit in grocery bins. They appear at family meals. They are roasted, mashed, sliced into fries, folded into pies, or eaten plain with a little butter and salt. But the quiet surprise is that a sweet potato is not really a potato at all. A regular potato is called Solanum tuberosum. It belongs to the nightshade family, along with tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. The sweet potato has a very different name. It is called Ipomoea batatas, and it belongs to the morning glory family. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. It helps others find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy traveler at a time. The quiet continues here, just as it is. A sweet potato is closer to a flowering vine than it is to the pale, round potato that grows under cooler soil. The family connection may sound surprising at first, until you imagine a morning glory vine climbing gently in the sun. Its heart-shaped leaves spread outward. Its flowers open like little trumpets. And somewhere below that living green surface, a related plant can send energy down into thick underground roots. That is the part we eat. A sweet potato is not a tuber in the same way a regular potato is. A regular potato is a swollen underground stem. That is why it has little eyes that can grow into new shoots. A sweet potato is a storage root. A storage root is a real root that has become thick because the plant has packed it with food for later. It is the plant's quiet reserve. Sunlight touches the leaves. The leaves make sugar through photosynthesis, the process plants use to turn light, water, and carbon dioxide into food. Some of that energy moves through the vine. Some of it travels downward. And over many warm days, the root slowly becomes larger, heavier, and richer with stored starch. Starch is a form of plant energy made from long chains of sugar. It does not always taste sweet right away. It can sit quietly inside the root, firm and pale, or orange or purple, waiting for time, warmth, curing, and cooking to change it. This is one reason the sweet potato feels so gentle to eat. It is not just a vegetable pulled from the ground. It is a season of sunlight folded into a root. Its sweetness began above the soil, in green leaves spread under warm air. Its shape formed below the soil, where the plant made a hidden storehouse. And its true identity was never the simple potato-like name we gave it. It was a morning glory relative all along. A vine plant, a root plant, a food that carries its own quiet misunderstanding in the name. Tonight, that is where the journey begins. With one warm root on a plate, familiar enough to feel comforting, but strange enough to open a whole world beneath the skin. Follow the sweet potato backward from the plate, and it slowly becomes green again. The soft orange flesh returns to a field of warm soil. A thin vine stretches outward under the sun. Leaves spread from the stems in loose, heart-shaped patterns. Some sweet potato leaves are pointed. Others are rounded or slightly lobed, depending on the variety. From above, the plant can look like a living blanket laid across the ground. Sweet potato is often grown as an annual crop, which means farmers usually plant it, harvest it, and begin again the following year. In warm places, the plant can behave more like a tender perennial, living longer when frost never comes. Cold is one of its limits. A light frost can damage the green leaves. A hard frost can blacken the vines and bring the season to a close. This is why sweet potatoes are usually planted after the soil has warmed and the danger of frost has passed. They belong to heat, long days, and patient growing time. Most sweet potatoes need about 85 to 120 days after planting before the storage roots are ready. That is almost 3 to 4 months of sunlight moving through leaves and into the plant. The vines do not stand upright like corn. They move outward along the ground. Their stems can root where they touch the soil, and these spreading stems are often called runners. A runner is a stem that travels sideways and helps the plant spread across open space. In a garden bed, one plant can cover a surprising amount of ground. The leaves shade the soil as they grow. The stems wander between rows. The plant slowly turns empty space into a wide green mat. Many home gardeners do not begin sweet potatoes with seeds. They begin with slips. A slip is a young shoot that grows from a mature sweet potato root. To make slips, growers place a healthy root in warm, moist conditions and wait for small green shoots to rise from it. This can take about 6 weeks. The shoots are then pulled or cut from the root and planted into warm soil. Each little slip looks delicate at first. It may have a thin stem, a few young leaves, and small roots beginning at the base. But once it settles into warm ground, it starts building the plant that will later feed the hidden roots below. The leaves do the quiet work of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process plants use to make food from sunlight. The leaf takes in carbon dioxide from the air through tiny openings called stomata. Water comes up from the roots. Light gives the plant energy to turn those simple ingredients into sugars. Those sugars are then moved through the plant in a living transport system. Some energy keeps the leaves alive. Some helps the stem spread. Some travels downward, toward the roots that will slowly thicken underground. This is where the sweet potato begins to feel less like a simple food and more like a season being stored. The plant gathers light day after day. It uses warm air, steady moisture, and green leaf surface to build more energy than it needs for the moment. That extra energy becomes reserve food. The storage roots are the plant's pantry beneath the soil. For many weeks, there may be very little to see from above except vines getting longer. A gardener might notice leaves covering more of the bed. They might see the stems sliding over the soil after rain. They might pull back the foliage and find only thin roots at first. The important change is slow. A sweet potato plant does not rush into fullness. It builds the above-ground body first, then sends more and more food downward. The root on the plate began as part of this quiet system. Before it was baked, before it was cured, before its skin wrinkled in the oven, it was connected to leaves that opened to the sun. Its sweetness began as light. Its weight began as time. Its shape began with a vine spreading softly across warm ground. Above the soil, the plant is visible and green. Below the soil, the first small roots are beginning to change. Under that green cover, the work turns inward. The vine still spreads across the warm soil, leaf by leaf, but the future meal is forming in the darker space below. At first, the young roots look ordinary. They are pale, thin, and branching, more like threads than food. Some reach outward to gather water. Others explore small pockets of air between grains of soil. A few begin to change their purpose. Inside those roots, the plant starts placing extra food into living cells. That food is mostly carbohydrate, a word that means energy-rich material made from carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Plants build carbohydrates from sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. Then they move that energy through their tissues as sugar. When the plant has more sugar than it needs right away, it can store some of it as starch. Starch is sugar linked into long chains. Those chains take up less space than loose sugar and can be packed neatly inside plant cells. This is how a thin root can slowly become thick. Cell by cell, the storage root fills. Its center becomes denser. Its outer layers stretch. The shape that will later sit on a cutting board is being built quietly in the soil. Botanists describe sweet potatoes as storage roots. Regular potatoes grow as stem tubers, which are swollen underground stems. A sweet potato grows from root tissue, so its job in the plant is tied closely to water, minerals, and stored food. This difference matters because the plant has to form the edible part, while it is also building a working root system. During the first 50 to 60 days after planting, the crop is especially sensitive to drought. That early window is important because the young plant is deciding which roots will become storage roots. Dry soil can slow the formation of those roots. A garden bed may still look healthy from above, with green leaves spread across the surface, while the hidden roots below are receiving a quieter signal that water is scarce. Under dry stress, the plant may put more effort into survival than storage. Growth continues, but the shape and size of the future crop can suffer. Uniform moisture helps the plant build steadily. Uniform means even and regular, rather than swinging between dry and soaked. A sweet potato bed does best when the soil stays gently moist, with water available around the root zone. The root zone is the part of the soil where most roots are actively growing. In that space, fine root hairs take in water and dissolved minerals. Those root hairs are tiny extensions of root cells. They are so small that they cannot be seen clearly without magnification, yet they greatly increase the surface area of the root. More surface area allows the plant to drink from more contact points in the soil. Too much water brings a different problem. When soil becomes saturated, the small air spaces between soil particles fill with water. Roots still need oxygen to stay alive. Without enough air, root tissues weaken, and fungi or bacteria can begin to invade. This is one reason excess water can lead to root rot. Rot is decay, caused by microbes breaking down damaged or weakened plant tissue. A storage root can also split when water arrives too quickly after stress. The inside may expand faster than the skin can stretch. A crack opens along the surface, leaving the root more exposed to drying and disease. From above, none of this has to look dramatic. The vine may keep its gentle sprawl. Leaves may still tilt toward the sun in the morning. Warm rain may darken the soil, then drain slowly away. Beneath that calm surface, timing is shaping the crop. A storage root becomes food through balance. Enough warmth to keep growth moving. Enough moisture to support swelling. Enough air in the soil to let roots breathe. Over many days, the plant keeps sending energy downward. The thin roots that were once easy to overlook begin to gain weight. Their cells fill with stored starch. Their forms become rounder, longer, or tapered, depending on the variety and the soil around them. By harvest time, the hidden reserve may be large enough to fill a hand. Yet the story of flavor is still unfinished. Even after the root is lifted from the earth, its sweetness is still waiting to deepen. At harvest, the soil opens around the roots. A digging fork, a plow blade, or a mechanical harvester loosens the row. The vines may already be cut back. The leaves that spent months gathering sunlight begin to dry at the edge of the field. Under them, the swollen roots come up slowly, still carrying damp soil in the lines of their skin. Fresh sweet potatoes can look sturdy, but at this stage they are easy to bruise. Their outer skin is thin. A scrape from a tool, a hard drop into a crate, or rough rubbing by hand can leave small wounds across the surface. Those marks may seem harmless at first. Later, they can become places where water escapes or microbes enter. A microbe is a tiny living thing, such as a fungus or bacterium, too small to see without a microscope. Some microbes help soil stay alive. Others can cause decay when they enter damaged plant tissue. For this reason, sweet potatoes are handled with care after harvest. Workers may lift them gently, sort them by size, and place them into bins without knocking them together too much. The root has left the ground, but its chemistry is still active. A freshly dug sweet potato is often less sweet than one that has rested properly. Inside the root, much of the stored energy still sits as starch. Starch is made of long chains of sugar molecules linked together. The tongue does not read those long chains as strong sweetness. Over time, some of that starch can change into simpler sugars. Those smaller sugars are easier for the tongue to notice. This change begins during curing. Curing is a warm, humid resting period after harvest. Commercial growers often cure sweet potatoes at about 85 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is kept very moist, usually around 80 to 90% relative humidity. Relative humidity means how much water vapor the air is holding, compared with how much it could hold at that temperature. A curing room might feel warm and heavy, almost like a greenhouse after rain. The roots sit in crates or bins while the air around them stays steady. This curing period often lasts 5 to 10 days. During that time, the root begins repairing itself. Cells near small cuts respond by forming a protective layer. One important material involved is suberin. Suberin is a waxy substance that plants use to seal damaged areas. It helps reduce water loss and makes it harder for rot organisms to move inside. The process is a little like the root forming a quiet patch over its own skin. The root also begins changing inside. Enzymes, which are tiny natural tools made by living cells, help break some starch into sugar. An enzyme does not get used up like an ingredient. It helps a chemical change happen more easily. In the sweet potato, this slow change begins building the flavor people expect from a well-cured root. The outside becomes better protected. The inside becomes a little sweeter. After curing, many roots are moved into cooler storage. The usual storage range is about 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That range is cool enough to slow decay, while still warm enough to avoid cold injury. Sweet potatoes can be damaged by colder temperatures, especially if they drop below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit for long enough. Cold injury can make the flesh harder, darker, or more likely to decay later. Stored correctly, the roots can continue developing flavor over several weeks. A common storage period is 6 to 8 weeks after curing. During that time, sugars can increase further, and the root becomes better suited for baking. This is why a sweet potato can improve after harvest. The field gives it size. Curing gives it protection. Storage gives its chemistry more time. A root, pulled from the soil in early autumn, may taste different from one opened weeks later in a quiet kitchen. The change happens slowly, without any visible movement. No leaf is gathering sunlight now. No vine is running across the ground. Still, the root continues its final preparation. Its skin firms. Its wounds close. Its stored starch begins shifting toward sweetness. By the time it reaches the oven, the root has already passed through soil, harvest, warm air, moist curing rooms, and cool storage. Curing prepares the sweetness, and heat will bring it fully forward. By the time the root reaches the oven, much of its quiet preparation has already happened. The skin has had time to firm. Small harvest wounds have begun to seal. Some of the stored starch has already shifted toward sugar during curing and storage. Now heat begins the change people can smell. A sweet potato in a roasting pan warms from the outside inward. The skin dries first. Moisture inside the root turns to steam. The flesh begins to loosen around the fork marks, slowly changing from firm and chalky to soft and dense. At room temperature, much of the root's energy is still stored as starch. Starch is made from many sugar units, joined together in long chains. Because those chains are large, the tongue does not sense them as strong sweetness. They are more like packed away food inside the plant's cells. As the root warms, enzymes begin working on those starch chains. An enzyme is a tiny protein tool that helps one chemical change happen faster. In sweet potatoes, one important enzyme is called beta amylase. Beta amylase helps cut starch into maltose. Maltose is a simple sugar made from two smaller sugar units joined together. It tastes sweet, and it helps create the syrupy flavor that makes a baked sweet potato seem almost honeyed. The timing of heat matters. As the inside of the root passes through warm cooking temperatures, beta amylase has time to work. A slow bake gives the enzyme a longer chance to break some starch apart before the heat rises high enough to stop its activity. This is why a gently baked sweet potato can taste sweeter than one cooked very quickly. The oven may be set much hotter than the enzyme's best working range, but the center of the root warms gradually. For a while, the inside passes through the temperatures where the chemistry can happen. The flesh changes in another way too. Starch granules begin to absorb water. A starch granule is a tiny packet of starch inside the plant cell. When enough heat reaches it, the granule swells. Its tight structure loosens. Food scientists call this gelatinization. The word sounds technical, but the process is simple to picture. A firm, dry-feeling structure takes in water and softens. That is part of why a sweet potato becomes smooth enough to mash with a spoon. The plant built the starch to store energy. The oven changes the starch so the body can use it more easily. That softening also changes how flavor reaches the mouth. A raw sweet potato is hard, crisp, and mild. A cooked one releases aroma from its warm flesh. Steam carries earthy and sweet smells upward. The texture becomes easier to chew, which lets saliva mix with the food. Saliva contains its own starch-breaking enzyme called amylase, adding a small final step as the food is eaten. Sweetness arrives from several places at once. Curing has already increased sugar. Storage can continue that slow shift over weeks. Baking adds the heat that lets starch soften and maltose form. When the root is finally opened, the surface may look glossy in places. A little syrup may gather near the edges. The orange flesh can pull apart in soft strands, especially in moist varieties. Nothing had to be added for that sweetness to appear. The root carried the ingredients inside itself. The leaves made the sugars during the growing season. The root packed much of that energy away as starch. Curing and storage began the slow change. Heat gave the process its final movement. This is why the sweetness feels so deep. It belongs to the root's own history. A sweet potato fresh from the oven is a record of field time, curing time, storage time, and cooking time, all meeting in one warm bite. Yet flavor does not come from sweetness alone. Two roots can go through the same oven and come out with very different bodies. One may collapse into a soft orange mash. Another may stay dense, pale, and chestnut-like under the skin. The hidden chemistry of sweetness has opened, and texture begins to tell its own quieter story. That difference begins before the root ever reaches the kitchen. A sweet potato carries its texture from the field, from its variety, and from the way its cells hold water and starch. In many American grocery stores, the most familiar sweet potatoes have orange flesh that turns soft and moist when baked. Some common moist-fleshed cultivars include Georgia Jet, Centennial, and Vardaman. A cultivar is a plant variety people have selected and grown because it has useful traits. Those traits might include sweetness, skin color, flesh color, harvest time, or the way the root feels after cooking. Georgia Jet is known for early production and deep orange flesh. Centennial became popular because it produces smooth, uniform roots with a moist texture. Vardaman was bred as a compact bush-type sweet potato, which makes it easier to grow in smaller garden spaces. These orange types often soften into a thick mash. A fork slides through them easily. The flesh may look glossy near the skin, with small pockets of syrup gathering where sugars and moisture have moved during cooking. In American markets, moist orange sweet potatoes have often been labeled as yams. That name became common in stores, especially for soft orange types, even though the plant itself remains sweet potato, Ipomoea batatas. The word on the sign can shape what people expect, but the texture comes from the root's biology. A Japanese or Korean sweet potato can feel very different. Many of those types have purple or reddish skin and pale yellow or cream-colored flesh. When roasted, they often become dense, dry, and almost chestnut-like. Instead of collapsing into a wet mash, they hold together more firmly. The inside can look smooth and packed, with a texture closer to roasted chestnut, baked squash, or a soft cake crumb. This comes partly from dry matter. Dry matter means everything in the root left behind after water is removed. A root with higher dry matter has more starch and solid material compared with water. That creates a denser bite. A root with lower dry matter and more moisture feels softer, wetter, and creamier after cooking. The starch inside the cells matters too. During baking, starch granules absorb water and swell. A starch granule is a tiny packet of stored plant energy. As heat moves through the root, these granules loosen and thicken the flesh around them. This process is called gelatinization. The word sounds like gelatin, and the image is helpful. The starch changes from firm and organized into something softer and more gel-like. Inside a moist orange sweet potato, that swelling happens with enough water to make the flesh smooth and tender. Inside a drier type, the same heat can produce a firmer texture because less free moisture is available to create that soft, syrupy feel. The cell walls also affect the final bite. Plant cells have walls made mostly of cellulose and pectin. Cellulose gives structure. Pectin helps hold cells together. Heat weakens some of those bonds, which lets the flesh soften. In some varieties, the cells separate more easily, creating a fluffy or mealy texture. In others, they hold more moisture and break down into a creamy mass. This is why two roots of the same size can behave differently in the same oven. One may split open and slump against the pan. The other may stay firm enough to slice cleanly after roasting. Their shape may look similar from the outside, but their inner balance of water, starch, sugar, and cell structure is different. Farmers, breeders, and cooks pay attention to those differences. A moist sweet potato may be better for pies, casseroles, and mashed dishes. A drier sweet potato may be better for roasting whole, slicing, or eating plain. In some parts of East Asia, dense, dry sweet potatoes are valued as a winter snack, often roasted until the skin wrinkles and the inside becomes sweet, firm, and warm. In the United States, the soft orange type became tied to holiday dishes, brown sugar, marshmallows, and baked sides. Each cooking tradition followed a texture people learned to enjoy. A sweet potato is therefore a family of roots with many possible bodies. Some are watery and soft. Some are starchy and dense. Some melt under a spoon. others hold their shape after a long bake. Once texture has opened the door to variety, color becomes easier to notice. The orange root, the pale root, and the purple root are all carrying different pigments under the skin. Cut into a familiar orange sweet potato, and the color appears all at once. The skin may be copper, rose, tan, or reddish-brown. Inside, the flesh can glow like autumn leaves, cooked pumpkin, or a piece of sunset held in the hand. That orange color comes from chemistry. More specifically, it comes from beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is a plant pigment. A pigment is a natural substance that gives color to living tissues. In plants, pigments help create the colors seen in leaves, flowers, fruits, and roots. Green leaves get much of their color from chlorophyll. Red and purple berries often get their color from anthocyanins. Orange carrots, pumpkins, and many orange sweet potatoes get their deep color from carotenoids. Carotenoids are yellow, orange, and red pigments made by plants and some tiny organisms. Beta-carotene is one of the best-known carotenoids. Its name comes partly from carrots, because scientists first identified carotene from carrot roots in the 1800s. The same family of pigments can make a sweet potato look golden, orange, or almost red-orange, depending on the variety and concentration. A pale sweet potato may contain much less beta-carotene. A deep orange one usually contains more. This is why color can sometimes tell a nutrition story before a root is ever cooked. Orange-fleshed sweet potatoes are known as an important source of provitamin A. Provitamin A means a substance the body can turn into vitamin A. Beta-carotene does this job. After a person eats orange sweet potato, digestion breaks the food down. Beta-carotene is absorbed with the help of fat in the meal. The body can then convert some of it into vitamin A, which supports normal vision, immune function, and healthy growth. This is especially important because vitamin A itself is needed in the retina, the light-sensitive layer at the back of the eye. There, it helps form molecules that allow the eye to respond to light. The number attached to this orange color is surprisingly small. About 125 grams of fresh orange-fleshed sweet potato from many varieties can contain enough beta-carotene to meet the daily provitamin A needs of a preschool-aged child. 125 grams is only about the weight of a small sweet potato, or a generous half cup once cooked and mashed. That means the color inside the root can carry real nutritional value in a very ordinary serving. The pigment sits inside plant cells tucked among starch, water, fiber, and other compounds. When the root is cooked, the flesh softens, and the orange color often looks even richer. A baked sweet potato may darken slightly as moisture leaves the surface and sugars concentrate near the edges. Mashed with a spoon, the color spreads smoothly, turning the bowl warm and bright. The orange is visible evidence of molecules that were built by the plant while it grew. During the season, leaves gathered sunlight above the soil. The plant moved energy downward. The storage root filled with starch and other compounds. Along with that stored energy, certain varieties also filled their flesh with carotenoid pigments. The result is a root that looks warm because of its chemistry. Its color belongs to the plant's own inner structure. Sweet potato varieties can range far beyond orange. Some have white flesh that stays pale after cooking. Some are yellow or cream-colored. Others are deep purple, from center to edge. The outside may also vary, with skin that looks beige, red, copper, pink, or violet. For a long time, people selected roots by traits they could see and taste. A farmer saving planting material might favor roots that grew well, stored well, cooked sweet, or looked appealing at market. Color became part of that selection. In places where orange-fleshed sweet potatoes became important for nutrition, breeders paid close attention to that color because it pointed toward beta-carotene. A root's brightness could become a clue. A slice on a cutting board could show something about the food inside. That makes the orange sweet potato feel different when it is seen clearly. The color is warmth, but it is also pigment. It is comfort, but it is also plant chemistry. A quiet orange root can hold enough beta-carotene to matter in the body of a growing child. Orange is only one part of this color story, and the deeper purple roots carry a darker kind of pigment under their skin. A purple sweet potato changes the feeling of the cutting board. The knife moves through a familiar root shape, yet the inside opens into a deep violet color. Some purple varieties look pale near the skin and darker toward the center. Others are purple almost all the way through. When sliced raw, the flesh can look dry, firm, and almost chalky. After cooking, the color may deepen into plum, indigo, or a dark wine shade. That color comes from anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are plant pigments that can create red, purple, and blue colors. They appear in many foods people already know. They help color blueberries. They tint blackberries. They give red cabbage its purple leaves. They also help create the dark skin of some grapes and the red color in certain cherries. In a purple sweet potato, anthocyanins collect inside the flesh of the root. The plant makes these pigments through a chain of chemical steps inside its cells. Those steps are guided by genes, which are the instruction pieces that tell living things how to build and manage their bodies. The result is color stored in the same underground organ that also holds starch, water, fiber, and minerals. Anthocyanins can shift color depending on acidity. Acidity means how sour or chemically sharp something is. In red cabbage, for example, the same pigment family can look red in acidic liquid and bluish in more alkaline liquid. Alkaline means the opposite side of the scale from acidic. This is why red cabbage juice is sometimes used in school science experiments as a natural color test. Purple sweet potatoes are usually less dramatic on a plate, but the same pigment family gives them their deep color. Their flesh can stay rich and dark in steamed pieces, roasted wedges, noodles, breads, and desserts. Food scientists pay attention to that strength. A pigment that holds its color through cooking can be useful beyond the fresh root. Purple-fleshed sweet potatoes have been studied for home cooking, processed foods, and natural colorants. A natural colorant is a color taken from a natural source, such as a plant, and used to tint food. The purple color can be used in products where people want a plant-based shade rather than a synthetic dye. It may appear in baked goods, drinks, powders, or snack foods, depending on the variety and processing method. Breeders also look at purple sweet potatoes because anthocyanins are linked with antioxidant activity. An antioxidant is a compound that can help protect molecules from damage caused by unstable particles called free radicals. The word can sound large, but the basic idea is simple. Some molecules in food can react with unstable molecules and help slow certain kinds of chemical damage. This does not make the root magical. It makes the pigment chemically interesting. In breeding programs, purple flesh becomes one trait among many. Scientists also measure sweetness. They study texture after cooking. They look at how roots grow in the field, how they store after harvest, and how they perform in different recipes. A purple root still has to taste good. It still has to soften in a useful way. It still has to survive harvest, curing, shipping, and storage. The color may bring attention, but the whole root has to work. This is the same kind of careful selection used for orange-fleshed sweet potatoes. Orange varieties are often valued for beta-carotene. Purple varieties are often valued for anthocyanins. Across both types, breeders keep returning to the same practical details. How sweet is the root after curing? How smooth is the flesh after baking? How well does it store in bins? How easily can it be sliced, mashed, dried, or turned into food people will actually eat? On a quiet table, the difference between orange and purple can look almost artistic. One root glows like warm clay. Another looks dark and cool, with a color closer to berries than to ordinary vegetables. Inside both, pigment chemistry has shaped what the eye sees before the tongue tastes anything at all. The sweet potato is becoming a hidden palette under the soil. Its flesh can carry gold, cream, orange, violet, and deep purple. Yet all of that color depends on the surface remaining whole long enough for the root to reach the kitchen. The inner pigments may draw the eye, but the thin outer skin carries the first burden of protection. Protection begins at the surface. After the root is cut open, the colors are easy to remember. Orange flesh, purple flesh, pale cream flesh under reddish skin. Yet before any of those colors reach a kitchen, the whole root depends on a very thin outer layer. Freshly dug sweet potatoes often come from the soil looking dusty and alive. Clumps of earth may cling to the skin. Fine root hairs may still hold bits of sand. The shape may be long and tapered, round and thick, or curved from growing around a stone in the row. At harvest, that skin is tender. It can slip or tear if handled roughly. A root knocked hard against a crate can bruise beneath the surface. A scrape from a shovel can open a small line across the skin. Even rubbing off dry soil too firmly can damage the outer layer. Growers often handle sweet potatoes more gently than regular potatoes because the skin sets slowly after harvest. A freshly harvested root is usually not washed before storage. Washing adds surface moisture and can spread decay organisms from one damaged root to another. Instead, loose soil is removed carefully. Large clumps may be brushed away by hand, but the goal is to keep the skin intact. The dirt left behind is often less dangerous than a new wound. That thin skin acts as a barrier. It slows water loss. It shields the flesh from fungi and bacteria. It helps keep the stored starch, sugar, pigments, and moisture inside the root where they belong. When the skin is cut, the inside is exposed to air and microbes. A microbe is a tiny living thing, such as a fungus or bacterium. Some microbes live harmlessly in soil. Others can grow inside damaged plant tissue and cause rot. Rot often begins quietly. A small soft spot appears. The tissue darkens. Moisture gathers where the root should feel firm. Curing helps the root defend itself after small injuries. During curing, sweet potatoes rest in warm, humid air. Commercial curing often happens around 85 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity near 80 to 90%. In that steady warmth, cells near a wound begin forming a protective layer. One key material is suberin. Suberin is waxy and water-resistant. Plants use it to seal damaged areas, much like a natural patch forming under the skin. This layer reduces water loss and makes it harder for decay organisms to move inward. Curing also helps the outer skin firm. A root that felt delicate right after harvest becomes better suited for weeks or months of storage. The change is quiet, but practical. The root keeps more moisture. The surface becomes more stable. Small cuts that could have turned into larger problems become sealed places on the skin. Temperature matters after curing. Sweet potatoes come from warm season plants, and cold can injure them even after harvest. Soil temperatures below about 50 degrees Fahrenheit can cause chilling injury. Cold storage below the safe range can do the same. Chilling injury may not show immediately. A root can look normal when it comes out of a cold place. Later, the flesh may darken, develop hard areas, lose flavor, or decay faster. This happens because cold disrupts living plant cells. Cell membranes, the thin layers that hold each cell together, become less stable. When those cells are damaged, the root can no longer store well. That is why sweet potatoes are usually stored warmer than regular potatoes. A common storage range is around 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Cool enough to slow sprouting and decay. Warm enough to protect the tropical nature of the crop. A bin of cured sweet potatoes may look still, but each root is being held in a careful balance of air, temperature, and moisture. The surface must stay dry enough to discourage rot. The air must stay humid enough to prevent shriveling. The temperature must avoid the cold that can bruise the root from within. All of this care protects what the plant built underground. The starch formed from sunlight. The sugars deepened during curing. The orange beta-carotene. The purple anthocyanins. The tender flesh that will soften later with heat. A sweet potato may look solid in the hand, but after harvest, it asks for patience and gentle handling. Its skin is the quiet border between stored abundance and the outside world. And while the root has held most of our attention, the green plant above the soil has its own forgotten gifts. Above the storage root, the vine keeps its own quiet record of sunlight. The same plant that thickens underground also spreads a wide green surface over the soil. Its leaves can be heart-shaped, triangular, or lightly lobed. Some look like small green shields. Others have deeper cuts along the edges, almost like the shape of a maple leaf softened into a vine. Each leaf is part of the plant's food-making system. Across its surface are tiny openings called stomata. Stomata are small pores that let carbon dioxide enter from the air. Water rises from the roots through the stem. Sunlight lands on the leaf. Inside the green tissue, chlorophyll captures light energy and helps turn water and carbon dioxide into sugar. Chlorophyll is the green pigment that makes leaves look alive and bright. This process is photosynthesis. It is the reason a sweet potato can turn air, water, and light into a root heavy enough to hold in the hand. The leaf feeds the root, but in many places it also feeds people. Young sweet potato leaves and tender shoots are edible. They can be picked while the vine is still growing, especially when the plant is strong and spreading. The youngest parts are usually the softest. A tender shoot may include a thin stem, a few new leaves, and a growing tip that bends easily between the fingers. Older leaves can be tougher, especially after weeks of sun and heat. In parts of Southeast Asia and New Guinea, sweet potato leaves are eaten as a vegetable. They may be cooked like spinach or other leafy greens. A cook might strip the tender leaves from the vine, rinse away dust, and add them to a pan with water, oil, garlic, onion, or coconut milk, depending on local tradition. When heated, the leaves darken and shrink. Their texture softens quickly. The flavor is mild and green, with a gentle earthiness that connects them back to the root below. In some food systems, this matters because the plant offers more than one harvest. The roots provide stored energy from starch. The leaves provide fresh greens while the crop is still alive in the field. The same vine can shade the soil, make sugars, and give edible shoots before the main root harvest. That makes the plant more useful than it appears in a grocery store. A supermarket sweet potato usually arrives alone, separated from its vine, washed, sorted, and stacked in a bin. The leaves are gone. The stem is gone. The living shape of the plant has been reduced to the part that stores best and travels most easily. Out in the field, the plant has a fuller form. It crawls across the ground. It sends down small roots from some nodes, the points on the stem where leaves attach. It builds a living cover that can help reduce weed growth once the vines are established. It keeps making food as long as warmth, light, and water allow. The leaves are also clues to the plant's health. A dark green vine with steady growth usually suggests that photosynthesis is feeding the crop well. Yellowing leaves can point to stress, poor soil, age, or disease. Wilted leaves during hot afternoons may show that the plant is losing water faster than the roots can replace it. By looking at the top of the plant, a grower can begin to understand what may be happening below. This is part of the hidden connection between leaf and root. The root stores the season, but the leaves gather it first. Every thick storage root began with light landing on green tissue. Every spoonful of orange flesh began with sugars made in leaves. Even the edible greens are part of the same story because the plant is both crop and canopy, both stored food and living vine. Yet even when people know the plant well, the names around it can become tangled. In markets and kitchens, sweet potatoes often carry a word that belongs to a very different crop. That word is yam. It appears on grocery signs, holiday cans, recipe cards, and family tables. A pile of copper-skinned orange sweet potatoes may be labeled yams in one store. The same kind of root may be labeled sweet potatoes in another. The two names have become tangled in North American kitchens, especially around moist orange varieties that bake into soft, sweet flesh. The plant itself has stayed the same. A sweet potato is still Ipomoea batatas. It still belongs to the morning glory family. Its edible part is still a storage root, formed below a spreading vine. A true yam belongs to a different plant group. True yams are species of Dioscorea. They belong to the yam family, called Dioscoreaceae. The name Dioscorea covers hundreds of yam species, many of them grown in tropical regions. Some true yams are major staple foods in West Africa, parts of the Caribbean, Asia, and the Pacific. They can look very different from the orange roots in many American grocery stores. A true yam often has rough, bark-like skin. Its flesh may be white, yellowish, or purple, depending on the species. Some can grow very large, far larger than an ordinary sweet potato. In markets where true yams are common, a single tuber can weigh several pounds. Some cultivated yams can grow even heavier, with long, thick shapes that look closer to a piece of tree trunk than a small baking root. The edible part of a yam is usually a tuber. A tuber is a swollen plant part that stores food underground. Sweet potatoes also store food underground, but they do it as roots. This is one reason the confusion lasts. Both crops grow below the soil. Both can be starchy. Both can be cooked by boiling, roasting, or mashing. Both can become important comfort foods in the places where people grow them. Botany separates them by family, flower structure, growth pattern, and ancestry. Culture often sorts them by taste, habit, and memory. In the United States, the word yam became strongly attached to moist orange sweet potatoes. For much of American food history, there were also firmer, paler sweet potatoes that cooked drier. When softer orange flesh types became popular, growers and sellers used the word yam to help distinguish them in the market. The name suggested a sweeter, moister root. It helped shoppers recognize the soft orange kind they wanted for baked dishes, casseroles, pies, and holiday meals. Over time, that market name became familiar. Many people grew up hearing orange sweet potatoes called yams at Thanksgiving. Cans of syrup-packed orange roots used the word yam on the label. Recipes passed through families carried the same name. The word became part of the food's emotional life, even while the plant remained a sweet potato. Scientific names work differently. They are built to hold relationships steady across language and region. Ipomoea batatas points back to the sweet potato's place among morning glory relatives. Dioscorea points toward true yams and their own long history of cultivation. These names do not erase local language. They give the plants a clearer map. On a kitchen counter, the difference becomes easier to picture. A typical orange sweet potato may be smooth-skinned, tapered at the ends, and about the size of a hand. A true yam from an international market may have a rougher surface, a heavier body, and a drier, starchier flesh. The sweet potato vine makes trumpet-shaped flowers related to morning glories. Many yam plants climb as twining vines from a separate plant family. The names may meet in a grocery aisle, but the plants began in different branches of life. Untangling the word yam gives the sweet potato its own shape again. The root is no longer hidden under a borrowed name. It can return to its own story as a warm season crop of the Americas, carried, selected, cooked, and renamed by many hands. With the name clearer, the path begins to lead backward, away from modern shelves and holiday dishes, toward the first people who learned to grow this root thousands of years ago. Long before that root had a market name, it had a place in the hands of early growers. The path leads away from grocery bins and holiday tables, into warm American landscapes where vines spread over open soil. Sweet potato is thought to have originated in Central America or northwestern South America. Its native range is often placed across Mexico, Central America, and northern South America. Those regions hold the kind of warmth the plant needs: frost-free seasons, strong sunlight, soils where a vine can run low to the ground, while its roots thicken out of sight. The earliest people who used sweet potatoes were working with a wild plant that likely looked less predictable than the crop we know today. Some roots may have been thin. Some may have been bitter, stringy, or small. Others would have been larger, sweeter, softer, or easier to cook. Domestication begins in choices like that. Domestication means people slowly change a plant over many generations by choosing which plants to keep growing. A family might save planting material from roots that tasted better. A village might favor vines that produce more food in the same patch of soil. A grower might notice that one plant stored longer after harvest, while another spoiled quickly. Over many seasons, those small choices begin to shape the crop. The plant changes because people keep giving certain traits a better chance to continue. Sweet potatoes are usually grown from slips or pieces of living plant material, rather than from true seed in the way many garden vegetables are. That matters because a useful plant can be copied. A vine that makes a good root can be continued through shoots. A root with good traits can produce slips that carry the same living pattern forward. In this way, an ancient grower could preserve a valuable plant more directly than waiting for random seedlings. The crop became a partnership between human attention and plant growth. There is physical evidence that sweet potatoes were present very far back in time. In a cave in Peru, ancient sweet potato remains have been dated to about 8080 BC. That date reaches deep into the early Holocene, the period after the last ice age when climates warmed and many human groups were changing the way they gathered, hunted, planted, and lived. A date like 8080 BC places sweet potato remains more than 10,000 years before the present day. The root on a modern plate is connected to a food history, older than cities, older than writing, and older than the first metal tools. The cave image is easy to picture. Dry stone, dusty layers of earth, plant remains preserved long enough for scientists to study them thousands of years later. A root that once grew in warm soil left a trace inside a shelter where people moved, cooked, rested, or stored food. Archaeology often works through fragments like this: a seed, a charred piece of plant tissue, a dried root remain hidden in a layer of soil. Small evidence can carry a long story when it is found in the right place and measured carefully. Early sweet potato selection would have been practical. People would have cared about whether the root filled the stomach. They would have noticed which vines survived dry periods. They would have learned which roots cooked well in ash, steam, clay pots, or hot stones. Color may have mattered too, because pale, yellow, orange, and purple roots all look different when cut open. Flavor, size, storage life, and cooking texture became part of the plant's future. Each saved vine was a quiet decision. Each replanted shoot carried that decision into another season. By the time sweet potato became a known crop across different regions, it already held a long record of human care. Its name would change from language to language. Its recipes would change from coast to coast. Its roots would be roasted, boiled, mashed, dried, and carried. The plant began in the Americas, shaped by warm climates and patient selection. Then its story widened beyond its first landscapes. A crop with such useful roots rarely stays in one place forever. Across the Pacific, that usefulness becomes harder to explain. Sweet potato began in the Americas, in warm regions of Mexico, Central America, and northern South America. Yet by the time Europeans entered the Pacific world, sweet potatoes were already growing on Polynesian islands far from the crop's native range. They were present in places separated from South America by thousands of miles of open ocean. That distance makes the root more than a food. It becomes a clue. The Pacific is not an empty gap on a map. It is a vast moving world of currents, winds, islands, reefs, storms, and long human voyages. Polynesian navigators crossed it with great skill, using stars, wave patterns, bird movements, cloud shapes, and the color of water to find islands over enormous distances. Their canoes carried people, animals, tools, stories, and living plants. Crops mattered deeply on remote islands because survival depended on what could be planted after landfall. Taro, breadfruit, banana, yam, and coconut all became part of island food systems. The sweet potato joined that world too, and its arrival raised a lasting puzzle. How did a South American crop reach Polynesia before ordinary European trade can explain it? Several ideas have been studied carefully. One possibility is human contact. People from Polynesia may have reached the coast of South America and carried the crop back. South American people may also have traveled westward, meeting island communities in the Pacific. Another possibility involves natural movement. A sweet potato root or seed might have floated across the ocean, though the plant's survival through salt water, time, and landing conditions makes that explanation difficult to prove. Scientists look at many kinds of evidence because no single clue settles the whole story. Language is one clue. In parts of Polynesia, the sweet potato is known by words like kumara or kumara. Similar sounding words have been noted in parts of South America, where related names were used for sweet potato. A shared sounding crop name does not prove a voyage by itself. Words can change, travel, and be misunderstood. Still, the sound of the name became part of the larger mystery, like a faint echo carried with the plant. Plant DNA gives another clue. DNA is the instruction material inside living things. By comparing DNA from sweet potato varieties in different regions, scientists can estimate how closely those plants are related. A 2013 genetic study found support for a prehistoric transfer of sweet potato from the Peru-Ecuador region into Polynesia. That does not describe a simple scene with a clear date, a named canoe, and a known landing beach. It suggests that the roots grown in Polynesia carried a genetic connection to South American sweet potatoes strong enough to point toward ancient movement. Human DNA has added another layer. In 2020, a large genetic study found traces of Native American ancestry in people from some Polynesian island groups. The strongest match pointed toward indigenous populations from the region now known as Colombia. The study suggested that contact may have happened around the early 1200s, long before European ships reshaped the Pacific. This finding does not turn the sweet potato into perfect proof. It makes the wider pattern more interesting. A crop, a word, and human ancestry all seem to point toward contact across a huge ocean. The details remain debated because ancient history rarely arrives whole. Plant remains decay. Wooden canoes disappear. Coastal settlements can be washed away, buried, or built over. What survives may be a root in a dry layer, a name in a language, or a small signal in DNA. Each clue has to be handled carefully. The sweet potato sits gently in the middle of that evidence. It was useful enough to carry. It was hardy enough to grow. It was valuable enough to become part of island life. On a volcanic island, a sweet potato vine could spread across warm soil and produce food below ground, even where other crops struggled. Its storage roots could be roasted, steamed, shared, saved, and replanted. The same plant that began as a domesticated crop in the Americas became part of another world of gardens and meals. The root now carries ocean distance inside its story. It links coastlines, languages, genes, and voyages. As sweet potatoes moved, people carried more than one form of the crop. They carried differences in color, texture, sweetness, and use. And those differences began to widen into a whole family of roots. A crop that travels becomes many crops in practice. Across different soils, islands, markets, and kitchens, sweet potatoes begin to show their range. Some roots have pale tan skin and white flesh. Some are golden inside, with a mild flavor and a dry bite. Some carry orange flesh that softens deeply in the oven. Some hold purple flesh so dark that a fresh slice can stain the cutting board. The outside can vary as much as the inside. Sweet potato skin may be cream, copper, rose, red, brown, or violet. Two roots can sit beside each other in a market bin with similar shapes and completely different interiors. A pale root might cook firm and starchy. A deep orange root might become wet and smooth. A purple root might stay dense, with a texture closer to roasted chestnut or thick cake. These differences come from genetics. Genetics means the inherited instructions a plant carries inside its cells. Those instructions help decide skin color, flesh color, root shape, starch level, moisture, flowering habit, and harvest timing. Human selection then adds another layer. When people save planting material from the roots they like best, they help those traits continue. A community that prefers dry roasted roots may keep drier types. A market that rewards bright orange flesh may favor orange varieties. A farmer who needs roots to store through a long season may choose types with better keeping quality. Over time, those choices become local food traditions. In some places, white or pale yellow sweet potatoes are preferred because they cook dense and mild. In others, moist orange roots became the standard for sweet dishes, pies, and soft-baked meals. Purple fleshed roots became valued in parts of Asia and the Pacific for their color, flavor, and use in noodles, sweets, powders, and natural colorants. Color and texture are tied to chemistry. Orange flesh points to carotenoid pigments, especially beta-carotene. Purple flesh points to anthocyanins, the same broad pigment family that gives color to blueberries, blackberries, and red cabbage. Dryness often points to higher dry matter, meaning more solid material compared with water. A root with higher dry matter usually feels denser after cooking. A root with more moisture can feel softer, smoother, and more syrupy. Sweetness also varies. Some roots have more sugar after curing. Some develop a stronger maltose sweetness during baking. Some remain mild, even when cooked well. Breeders study these traits because a good sweet potato has to satisfy many needs at once. It should grow well in the field. It should resist damage during harvest. It should cure and store without rotting quickly. It should cook into the texture people expect. It should have the color and sweetness that local markets want. Modern sweet potato work often focuses on orange flesh, sweetness, texture, and purple fleshed varieties rich in anthocyanins. Those goals may sound simple on a plate, but each one depends on many genes working together inside the plant. The scale of sweet potato growing has also become global. The crop began in the Americas, but it now grows across warm regions of the world. Asia is the largest sweet potato producing region. China is the largest producer and consumer. In China, sweet potatoes have been used for food, animal feed, starch production, noodles, alcohol, and processed products. In parts of Africa, orange-fleshed sweet potatoes have become important for nutrition. In the United States, sweet potatoes are closely tied to southern agriculture and holiday cooking. In the Pacific, they became woven into island food systems after their long and debated journey across the ocean. One plant family now fills many roles: a food for roasting, a crop for storage, a source of color, a source of starch, a familiar root shaped by thousands of local choices. The sweet potato is no longer only the orange root from the beginning. It has become a whole spread of forms, each carrying a different balance of pigment, moisture, sugar, and human preference. Some of those differences matter for taste and tradition. Some begin to matter for health in a much larger way. The orange flesh that once looked simply warm and familiar becomes especially important when its pigment can help fill a missing nutrient in the human body. Orange flesh begins to carry a larger purpose when it is seen through nutrition. The same color that makes a baked sweet potato look warm comes from beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is a carotenoid pigment, one of the yellow and orange compounds plants can build inside their tissues. In the human body, beta-carotene can be changed into vitamin A. That makes it a provitamin A compound. Provitamin means the body can use it as a starting material to make a vitamin it needs. Vitamin A matters for normal vision, especially in low light. It also helps the immune system work properly and supports growth in children. Inside the eye, vitamin A helps form light-sensitive molecules in the retina. The retina is the thin layer at the back of the eye that receives light and sends signals toward the brain. When vitamin A is too low for too long, vision and health can suffer. This is one reason orange-fleshed sweet potatoes became important far beyond flavor. Plant breeders worked with varieties that naturally carried more beta-carotene in their flesh. Breeding means choosing parent plants with useful traits and growing new plants from them over many generations. When the goal is better nutrition, the process is often called biofortification. Biofortification means improving the nutrient content of a crop while it is being bred and grown. The nutrient is built into the food itself. With orange-fleshed sweet potatoes, the color is part of the delivery system. A deeper orange root often signals more beta-carotene. A slice of the root can show, in a very visible way, that the plant is carrying a useful compound inside its cells. This matters in places where vitamin A deficiency has been a serious problem. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa, many families rely on staple foods that fill the stomach, but may not provide enough vitamin A. A staple food is a food eaten often enough to form a major part of the diet. White flesh sweet potatoes, cassava, maize, and other common staples can provide energy, but they may be low in pro-vitamin A. Orange-fleshed sweet potato offered a practical idea. Instead of asking families to eat an unfamiliar medicine-like food, farmers and nutrition workers could promote a crop that already fit many food systems. The root could be boiled. It could be mashed. It could be steamed, roasted, or added to porridge and bread. Its young leaves could also be used as greens. The number attached to this idea is small enough to picture. About 125 grams of fresh orange-fleshed sweet potato from many varieties can meet the daily vitamin A needs of a young child. That is roughly the weight of a small root. On a plate, it might look like a modest serving of soft orange food. In the body, the beta-carotene from that serving can help build vitamin A. The crop also has practical farming advantages. Sweet potatoes can grow from slips rather than purchased seed every season. They can produce food underground, where the storage roots are somewhat protected from harsh sun. Many types can grow in warm regions with fewer inputs than some other crops. Inputs are things farmers add, such as fertilizer, irrigation, labor, or purchase materials. A food that grows locally and carries its own nutrition can be easier to keep using over time. Still, a nutrition crop has to be accepted by the people who cook and eat it. Color alone is not enough. The root has to taste good. The texture has to suit local dishes. The vines have to grow well in local soil. The harvest has to be worth the farmer's work. This is why orange-fleshed sweet potato programs often pay attention to both agriculture and cooking. A root that is rich in beta-carotene but disliked at the table will not help much. A root that grows well, stores well, cooks well, and brings useful nutrition can become part of daily life. The orange flesh now holds more meaning than it did at the beginning. Its pigment is connected to the eye, the immune system, the child's plate, and the farmer's field. The same soft root that feels comforting in a quiet kitchen can also become a tool for public health. Making that tool stronger, sweeter, easier to grow, and easier to share depends on the hidden instructions inside the plant. those instructions are unusually complex. Inside each sweet potato cell, the crop becomes harder to picture. The orange flesh, the purple flesh, the dry bite, the soft texture, and the stored beta-carotene all come from inherited instructions. Those instructions are held in DNA. DNA is the long molecule that carries a living thing's genetic information. It tells cells how to build proteins, guide growth, make pigments, respond to stress, and pass traits into future plants. For a breeder, those instructions matter deeply. A breeder may want an orange-fleshed sweet potato with more beta-carotene. They may want a root that tastes sweeter after curing. They may want smoother skin, better storage, stronger disease resistance, or a texture that works well in bread, porridge, fries, or roasted dishes. Each goal sounds simple when placed on a plate. Inside the plant, each trait can involve many genes working together. A gene is a stretch of DNA that helps control a trait. Some traits are shaped by one major gene. Many useful crop traits are shaped by groups of genes, each adding a small effect. Sweet potato makes this even more complicated because of its chromosome number. Chromosomes are packages of DNA inside the cell. Humans have 2 sets of chromosomes, one from each parent. Many familiar crops also carry 2 sets. Sweet potato carries 6 sets. Scientists describe the cultivated sweet potato as hexaploid. Hexa means 6. Ploid refers to sets of chromosomes. The full shorthand is 2n equals 6x equals 90 chromosomes. That means a typical cultivated sweet potato cell contains 90 chromosomes arranged across 6 related sets. A breeder working with a simpler crop may be able to predict more easily how a trait will appear in the next generation. With sweet potato, 6 sets of chromosomes can carry many different versions of the same gene. Those versions are called alleles. An allele is a form of a gene, like different spellings of the same instruction. Because sweet potato has so many copies, a single plant may carry a rich mix of alleles at once. This is part of what scientists mean when they call sweet potato highly heterozygous. Heterozygous means the copies of a gene are not all the same. The plant holds many genetic differences within itself. That can be useful because diversity gives breeders material to work with. It can also make inheritance harder to predict. A root with a strong orange color might pass that trait unevenly. A plant with good storage quality may produce offspring with mixed results. A vine that grows well in one climate may carry other traits that are less useful somewhere else. Breeding becomes less like following one straight path and more like sorting through many possible combinations. Sweet potato also brings a practical challenge through flowering and seed production. Many sweet potatoes are grown from slips, which are young shoots taken from a root. This allows farmers to copy a good plant. Breeders, however, often need flowers, pollen, and seeds to make new combinations. Some sweet potato varieties flower poorly. Some may fail to flower under certain day lengths or growing conditions. Even when flowers appear, the plant may reject its own pollen. This is called self-incompatibility. It means the plant has a built-in system that prevents self-fertilization. Sometimes one variety may also reject pollen from another variety. That is called cross-incompatibility. These barriers can make it harder to create seed from planned crosses. A breeder may have two parent plants with excellent traits and still struggle to make them produce useful seed together. The flowers themselves are beautiful and familiar looking. They often resemble morning glory flowers, with a soft funnel shape and pale lavender or pinkish color in many types. Inside that delicate flower, the breeding problem becomes very exact. Pollen has to reach the right flower. The flower has to accept it. The seed has to form. The new seedling has to grow. Then the root has to be tested for color, sweetness, texture, yield, shape, disease resistance, and storage. A single promising sweet potato may represent years of planting, crossing, harvesting, curing, cooking, measuring, and trying again. The root feels simple in the hand because the plant hides its difficulty well. Its softness after baking gives no sign of the 90 chromosomes behind it. Its sweetness gives no hint of the many alleles moving through generations. The crop that can feel so gentle on a quiet plate is genetically intricate beneath the surface. And within that already tangled genome, scientists found an even stranger trace from deep biological history. The trace begins with a soil bacterium. Long before anyone could read DNA with modern machines, long before genetic engineering had a name, a tiny organism in the soil was already moving genetic material into plants. The organism is called agrobacterium. It lives around plant roots. Some kinds of agrobacterium can enter wounded plant tissue and transfer a small piece of DNA into the plant's cells. DNA is the instruction material that living things use to build and guide their bodies. When DNA from one organism becomes part of another organism's genome, scientists call that transgenic. Genome means the full set of genetic instructions inside a living thing. The word transgenic often sounds modern. It may bring to mind laboratories, glass dishes, white lights, and careful machines. Sweet potato carries a much older version of that idea. In 2015, researchers examined 291 cultivated sweet potato accessions. An accession is a plant sample kept in a collection, often representing a variety, a local type, or a breeding line. All 291 cultivated sweet potato accessions contained one or more pieces of agrobacterium transfer DNA. Transfer DNA is often shortened to tDNA. It means the piece of bacterial DNA that agrobacterium can move into a plant cell. That finding made cultivated sweet potato one of the clearest examples of a naturally transgenic food crop. The phrase sounds strange, beside such a familiar root. A baked sweet potato on a plate seems gentle and ordinary. Its skin wrinkles in the oven. Its flesh softens under a fork. Yet inside the plant's inherited instructions are traces of an ancient meeting between plant and bacterium. Agrobacterium is famous among plant scientists because of the way it interacts with wounded plants. In nature, the bacterium can cause growths on some plants by moving tDNA into plant cells. The transferred DNA can change how the plant tissue grows and what chemicals it produces. Modern plant biology learned from that natural ability. Scientists later used agrobacterium as a tool for studying plant genes and creating modified plants. The sweet potato case reaches backward before that human use. At some point in the crop's long history, Agrobacterium DNA entered the ancestors of cultivated sweet potatoes. The change became part of the plant line. It was passed down through slips, roots, vines, and generations of human selection. This matters because the bacterial DNA was found across cultivated sweet potatoes, rather than only in one rare modern variety. That wide pattern suggests the event happened deep in the history of the crop. The transferred DNA may have been present before people spread sweet potatoes widely through farming and trade. The exact effects of those inserted sequences are still studied carefully. Scientists do not treat the finding as a simple explanation for the whole crop. A sweet potato is shaped by many things: its 90 chromosomes, its storage roots, its pigments, its enzymes, its domestication, and the choices of growers over thousands of years. The agrobacterium DNA is one more layer inside that already complex story. Still, it changes how the root feels when we imagine it clearly. A plant can be shaped by sunlight. A plant can be shaped by soil. A plant can also be shaped by an ancient exchange with a microbe too small to see. In the dark space around roots, bacteria, fungi, minerals, and plant cells are always touching one another in chemical ways. Most of those contacts leave no permanent mark. This one left instructions behind. A small trace from a soil bacterium became part of a crop that people would later roast, mash, cure, store, and carry across oceans. The sweet potato begins to feel less like a fixed object and more like a living record. Inside its cells are signs of deep plant ancestry. Inside its genome are signs of microbial contact. Inside its food value are signs of human care. All of this is held quietly in a root that still looks simple in the hand. The same crop that grows from slips in warm soil also carries a hidden record of DNA movement from a world beneath the surface. A genome with 90 chromosomes was already difficult to follow. With ancient bacterial traces included, the sweet potato's family story becomes even more tangled, leading toward the wild relatives that help scientists map where it came from. To understand a crop with such a tangled genome, scientists look beyond the cultivated field. They search along roadsides, forest edges, dry valleys, slopes, and disturbed ground where wild morning glory relatives still grow. A domesticated plant often has wild cousins. These wild relatives may look smaller, tougher, weedier, or less useful as food. Yet they can hold important clues. Their leaves, flowers, seeds, roots, and DNA can help show how a crop's ancestry came together. For sweet potato, the family tree has been difficult to map. The cultivated plant is Ipomoea batatas. It carries 90 chromosomes. Its genome is hexaploid, meaning it has 6 sets of chromosomes. That gives scientists a complicated puzzle with many overlapping pieces. A simpler wild relative may carry 2 sets of chromosomes. That condition is called diploid. Di means 2. A plant with 4 sets is called tetraploid. Tetra means 4. Cultivated sweet potato with 6 sets is hexaploid. Hexa means 6. These numbers matter because chromosomes carry genes. If scientists can compare relatives with 2 sets, 4 sets, and 6 sets, they can begin to see how the larger genome may have formed. For years, there was a missing space in the story. Researchers knew several wild Ipomoea species related to sweet potato. Some were simpler diploid species. The cultivated crop, with its 6 chromosome sets, looked like it had passed through a more complex ancestry. A close tetraploid relative would help fill part of that gap. That is where Ipomoea equatoriensis enters the story. It was scientifically described in 2022. The name points toward Ecuador, the country where this plant became important to the origin puzzle. Ipomoea equatoriensis has been reported as the closest known wild relative of cultivated sweet potato. It is especially useful because it helps bridge part of the gap between simpler wild relatives and the more complex cultivated crop. The plant itself belongs to the same broader morning glory group. A morning glory flower can look delicate from the outside, with a soft funnel shape and petals opening toward the light. But inside the cells, the plant may carry ancestry written in chromosome number and DNA sequence. A wild vine growing quietly in Ecuador can become a key piece of crop history because its genome sits closer to the cultivated sweet potato than scientists had clearly recognized before. This kind of discovery can change how a crop is understood. When scientists find a close wild relative, they can compare DNA letter by letter. They can look for shared genes. They can study chromosome structure. They can ask which parts of the cultivated genome may have come from which ancestral lines. That work matters for more than history. Wild relatives may carry useful traits that domesticated crops have lost or weakened. A wild plant may handle drought better. It may resist a disease. It may flower more easily. It may survive in soil where cultivated plants struggle. For breeders, those traits can become valuable, especially when crops face heat, pests, changing rainfall, and soil stress. The sweet potato's origin story therefore reaches in 2 directions. It reaches backward, toward ancient vines and early domestication. It also reaches forward, toward future breeding. A plant described in 2022 can help explain a crop that people have grown for thousands of years. That is one of the quiet surprises of crop science. The past is sometimes clarified by a living plant still rooted in the present. Ipomoea equatoriensis does not solve every part of the sweet potato's ancestry. The crop's genome remains complex. Its ancient bacterial DNA adds another layer. Its domestication involved long human selection across warm American landscapes. Still, the Ecuadorian relative gives scientists a clearer foothold. It shows that the cultivated root has living cousins close enough to help trace its path. The sweet potato now feels like a family story still being mapped. A root on a plate connects to vines in fields, bacteria in soil, ancient caves in Peru, Pacific voyages, and a wild relative described only recently. Yet every ancestor, every gene, and every stored trace eventually returns to a living crop facing ordinary conditions. The plant may carry a strange history, but it still has to grow in soil, drink water, handle heat, and avoid cold. Back in the field, the sweet potato becomes practical again. Its ancestry may reach through wild vines, ancient caves, ocean crossings, and hidden DNA. But the crop still has to answer to weather. A farmer sees that truth in the row. The vine either spreads well or it struggles. The leaves either keep their green surface open to the sun or they curl under stress. The storage roots either swell steadily underground or they form small, cracked, uneven shapes. Sweet potato is often described as a hardy crop because it can grow under conditions that challenge many other food plants. It can tolerate dry spells once the plant is established. It can produce in poorer soils where heavier feeding crops may need more fertilizer. It can require fewer inputs and less labor than crops such as maize in some growing systems. Inputs are the things people add to help a crop grow, such as fertilizer, irrigation, chemicals, fuel, and repeated fieldwork. That makes sweet potato valuable in warm regions, where farmers may have limited resources or unpredictable rainfall. A mature sweet potato vine helps itself in simple ways. As the stems spread, they cover more ground. The leaves shade the soil. That shade can reduce weed growth once the crop is well established. Weeds still matter early in the season, when the slips are small and open soil remains between plants. Later, a strong vine can form a green mat that makes it harder for new weeds to find light. The same spreading habit that can look messy in a garden row becomes a useful form of protection. The crop's strength depends on timing. A well-rooted vine can handle some dry weather because its root system has already reached into the soil. The leaves may wilt slightly during a hot afternoon and recover when temperatures fall. The plant can slow its growth for a while, then continue when moisture returns. Early growth is more delicate. During the first 50 to 60 days after planting, sweet potato is especially sensitive to drought. That period matters because the young plant is forming the root system that will later become the crop. The storage roots are beginning to set their pattern. If the soil dries too much, the plant may protect itself by slowing growth. The future roots may remain smaller. Some may fail to thicken in the way they would under steadier moisture. From above, the vine may still look alive. Below the surface, the crop's final yield may already be changing. Soil moisture has to stay balanced. A gentle, even supply of water helps the roots expand without sudden stress. Long dry periods can limit growth. Heavy water can cause a separate kind of damage. When soil stays soaked, air spaces between soil particles fill with water. Roots need oxygen for normal cell activity. Without enough oxygen, root tissue weakens. Fungi and bacteria can move more easily into damaged areas. This can lead to root rot, where the tissue becomes soft, dark, and decayed. Excessive water can also cause storage roots to split. A split root may happen when growth changes too quickly. The inside expands, pressure builds, and the skin opens along the surface. The crack may look like a long seam running down the root. That wound makes storage harder because it creates an entry point for decay and a path for moisture loss. The sweet potato's limits are visible in these marks. A small root shows a dry season. A cracked root shows uneven water. A rotten spot shows poor drainage or damage. A healthy root shows warmth, time, steady moisture, and enough air in the soil. This is why the crop feels both sturdy and sensitive. It can grow in places where other crops struggle, while still depending on the right early conditions to become useful food. Its resilience is real, and it is shaped by ordinary details. rainfall, soil texture, weed pressure, planting date, the strength of the slips, the warmth of the season. A sweet potato field can look calm from a distance, just a low cover of green leaves and wandering stems. Inside that calm, the crop is responding to small changes every day. Growing the root brings it into the world. Keeping it useful after harvest begins a different challenge, because food that feeds people has to last beyond the field. After harvest, the roots gather in crates, bins, sheds, and curing rooms. They may still carry a little dry soil in the shallow lines of their skin. Some are long and narrow. Some are rounder and heavy. Some have small scars from tools, stones, or the pressure of growing against other roots underground. At this point, the crop has already survived the field, but it has entered a more delicate stage. A sweet potato is still living tissue after harvest. Its cells still hold water. Its skin still breathes slowly. Its stored starch and sugar are still held inside fragile plant walls. Without the right handling, those roots can shrivel, rot, sprout, or develop cold damage. This is why storage begins with curing. Curing has already helped sweetness, but its larger job is protection. In many storage guides, sweet potatoes are cured under warm, humid conditions for 1 to 3 weeks. An ideal curing period may use air around 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, with 80 to 90% relative humidity for about 1 week. That warmth keeps the root's healing processes active. That humidity keeps the skin from drying too quickly while wounds begin to close. Relative humidity means how much water vapor is in the air, compared with how much the air could hold at that temperature. In a curing space, the air feels moist enough to slow shriveling, while still allowing the roots to heal. Small cuts begin forming protective tissue. Waxy materials help seal damaged spots. The skin becomes more stable. A root that might have decayed quickly in a cold, dry room becomes better prepared for storage. After curing, sweet potatoes need a different kind of care. They are usually stored cooler, around 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is still kept fairly humid, often around 80 to 90% relative humidity. This balance matters. Dry air pulls moisture out of the root. A sweet potato that loses too much water begins to wrinkle and shrink. The flesh may become less pleasant to eat. Air that is too wet can encourage rot, especially if the roots have bruises or unhealed wounds. Temperature carries its own quiet risks. Below about 55 degrees Fahrenheit, sweet potatoes can develop chilling injury. Cold injury can change flavor, darken flesh, and make the root more likely to decay later. The damage may stay hidden at first. A root can look fine when it leaves storage, then show dark spots or poor texture when cooked. Above about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, a different problem can begin. The root may start to sprout. A sprout is a new shoot growing from stored energy in the root. Sprouting means the root is spending its reserves on new growth. Over time, that can reduce eating quality and storage life. A good storage room therefore asks for steadiness. Warm enough to avoid chilling. Cool enough to slow sprouting. Humid enough to protect moisture. Dry enough to discourage decay. The roots rest in that narrow comfort zone, stacked in bins or laid in crates, with air moving gently around them. Properly cured sweet potatoes can store for 6 to 12 months or more. That length of time changes what the crop means. A root harvested in autumn can still be eaten deep into winter. A crop grown in one season can feed people across another. Food security often depends on this kind of quiet storage. Fresh crops can be abundant for a short time and scarce later. A storage route helps stretch the harvest. Its useful life becomes longer because people understand its skin, its wounds, its water, and its temperature needs. The sweet potato's ability to last is partly biological and partly human. The plant builds the storage route. Growers cure it. Storage rooms protect it. Cooks later bring it back to warmth. By then, the root may have traveled through field rows, harvest bins, curing air, and months of waiting. Its sweetness has deepened. Its skin has held. Its energy has stayed inside. That ability to grow, store, nourish, and adapt is why sweet potatoes keep returning whenever people think seriously about the future of food. Its usefulness reaches beyond storage rooms and kitchen shelves. Sweet potato has become one of the crops people look toward when thinking about nutrition, changing weather, local farming, and food that can travel from field to table in many forms. Worldwide, sweet potato is often described as the 6th most important food crop. More than 105 million metric tons are produced each year. A metric ton is 1,000 kilograms, which is about 2,204 pounds. That means the global harvest reaches well over 231 billion pounds of roots in a year. About 95% of that production is grown in developing countries. That number gives the root a different scale. A single baked sweet potato may feel small in the hand. Across the world, the crop becomes field after field of vines, family gardens, market baskets, storage rooms, school meals, animal feed, starch factories, bakeries, and research plots. Its future value comes from the number of roles it can fill. For breeders, improving sweet potato means balancing many traits at once. A root can be nutritious and still fail if people do not like the taste. A root can taste good and still be difficult if it stores poorly. A plant can grow well in one region and struggle when rain patterns change. A variety can have beautiful color and still need better disease resistance, better yield, or a better shape for harvest and shipping. This is why modern sweet potato work studies the whole crop. Researchers look at orange flesh rich in beta-carotene. They measure sweetness and sugar content. They test texture after cooking. They evaluate root shape, skin quality, and storage behavior. They also study purple-fleshed varieties with high anthocyanins and antioxidant activity. Those purple roots can matter for home cooking, processed foods, and natural colorants. A natural colorant is a plant-based color used to give food a certain shade. In a factory, purple sweet potato may become powder, paste, starch, flour, noodles, drinks, desserts, snacks, or coloring for other foods. In a home kitchen, the same pigment may simply appear as a dark violet slice on a plate. Orange sweet potatoes follow another path. Their beta-carotene can support vitamin A nutrition. Their sweetness can make them easier for children and families to accept. Their texture can be matched to local dishes, from mashed roots to bread products and soft porridges. A breeder has to think like a scientist, a farmer, a cook, and a shopper at the same time. The plant must perform in soil. The root must perform in storage. The food must perform in the mouth. Climate adds pressure to this balancing act. Sweet potatoes can tolerate dry spells once established, and they can grow in poorer soils than some heavier feeding crops. That strength matters in places where rainfall is uncertain or farm inputs are limited. Even so, the crop has its gentle limits. Young plants still need moisture during the first 50 to 60 days. Roots still suffer in waterlogged soil. Cold storage can still cause chilling injury. A future variety has to carry resilience without losing the qualities that make people want to grow it and eat it. This is where the sweet potato's long history becomes useful. It has already been shaped by thousands of years of selection. It has traveled across continents and oceans. It has adapted into white, yellow, orange, and purple forms. It has become dry, moist, dense, soft, mild, sweet, local, global, ancient, and modern. Each trait is part of the crop's toolbox. Future agriculture may need foods that do more than fill one narrow role. A useful crop may need to nourish people, fit familiar recipes, grow with fewer inputs, store for months, and support small farms as well as larger food systems. Sweet potato carries many of those abilities in one plant. The vine gathers light. The root stores energy. The flesh can hold pigments that matter to the body and to the eye. The crop can become a roasted meal, a flour, a puree, a color, a starch, or a source of planting slips for another season. The humble root has earned its importance quietly. After all its science, the last image becomes simple again. One warm sweet potato opened on a plate, with the whole story held inside it. The plate has become quiet again. A single sweet potato rests open, its skin loosened by heat, and its flesh soft enough for a spoon. At first glance, it looks simple. A warm root, a familiar food, a small orange shape on a table. Yet the name alone carries the first hidden layer. Sweet potato is Ipomoea batatas, a plant in the morning glory family. Its relatives are flowering vines, with leaves that spread towards sunlight, and trumpet-shaped blooms that open in warm air. Regular potatoes come from Solanum tuberosum, a nightshade plant with underground stem tubers. True yams come from Dioscorea, a separate group of climbing plants with their own rough-skinned tubers. The sweet potato belongs to its own path. Its edible part is a storage root. That means the part we eat began as root tissue, made to hold food for the plant. Above the soil, the vine gathered sunlight through green leaves. Inside those leaves, photosynthesis turned water, carbon dioxide, and light into sugar. That sugar moved through the plant. Some of it helped leaves and stems grow. Some traveled downward and became starch inside the swelling root. The root slowly filled cell by cell, becoming a hidden reserve under warm soil. Its best growth depended on balance. Early drought during the first 50 to 60 days could limit the forming roots. Too much water could bring rot or splitting. A healthy crop needed warmth, moisture, air in the soil, and time. Harvest brought the root into view. though its work continued after leaving the field. Freshly dug sweet potatoes bruise easily. Their skins can scrape. Their flesh can lose water. And small wounds can open paths for decay. Curing changed that. In warm, humid air, often around 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit with high humidity, the roots began to heal. Cells near damaged places form protective layers. Waxy material called suberin helped seal small wounds. At the same time, starch began shifting toward sugar. Later storage at about 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit helped preserve the root without chilling it. Then cooking completed another transformation. Heat moved inward from the skin. Steam formed inside the flesh. Starch granules absorbed water and softened through gelatinization. Enzymes helped break some starch into maltose, a simple sugar that gives baked sweet potatoes their deep syrupy sweetness. The sweet flavor was carried inside the root all along, waiting for curing, storage, and heat to bring it forward. Color added another layer. Orange flesh held beta-carotene, a carotenoid pigment the body can turn into vitamin A. That pigment connects the root to vision, growth, and nutrition. Purple flesh held anthocyanins, pigments also found in foods like blueberries, blackberries, red cabbage, and dark grapes. Those pigments made purple sweet potatoes valuable for cooking, processed foods, antioxidants, and natural color. The colors were more than decoration. They were chemistry made visible. History widened the root beyond the kitchen. Sweet potatoes were shaped in the Americas thousands of years ago. Ancient remains in Peru reach back to around 8080 BC. Over many generations, people saved vines and roots with useful traits. Size, sweetness, storage, color, and reliability all became part of human selection. The crop later traveled across oceans and became part of the Pacific story, where plant DNA, language, and human ancestry all raised careful questions about ancient contact and movement. Inside the root, the science grew stranger still. Cultivated sweet potato is hexaploid, with 90 chromosomes. That means it carries 6 sets of chromosomes, making breeding and inheritance unusually complex. Scientists also found ancient agrobacterium transfer DNA inside cultivated sweet potatoes. Agrobacterium is a soil bacterium that can move DNA into plant cells. Long before modern genetic tools existed, a natural DNA transfer became part of the crop's inherited story. A familiar food held a biological surprise from the soil itself. Now the root can become simple again, without becoming empty. It is still warm. It is still soft. It is still something ordinary enough to eat quietly at the end of the day. Yet inside that ordinary shape are vines, leaves, enzymes, pigments, ancient growers, ocean roots, storage rooms, breeding fields, and a genome full of hidden history. The sweet potato began as comfort. It became botany, chemistry, agriculture, and deep time. And then, gently, it returns to the plate. One warm root, carrying far more than it seemed to hold.